always say to everyone, this is all about what's going to create the best outcome for you. You work as a team in life. It makes sense that you work as a team in super. The most common misconception people have is super is all or nothing. That's not true. The opposite is the case. When you were talking about your Bible and the 4-year-old, I very nearly said you could have the 4-year-old in the self-managed super fund.
They're probably wondering, well, what's possible from a super sits in its own standalone entity, separate to
Completely separate.
Hey everyone, Michael Beresford from OpenCorp here. Welcome to today's podcast, our Brick to the Future podcast on SMSF investing. We are getting inundated about questions from clients and people that our clients know asking about SMSF. It's obviously more and more prevalent as the super fund performance finds its way into the media. People want to know more about it and how they can take advantage of potentially super in their portfolio. OpenCorp is not licensed to provide personal, financial, legal or tax advice. SMSF property investment must meet ATO guidelines. We support lending and property process and collaborate with licensed professionals to ensure compliance. And that is why it is my pleasure to introduce Rick Leighton from Ethical IQ. Rick, you are a cash flow, tax and SMSF expert. Thanks for joining us on today's podcast.
I am. Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Excellent. So, as I said, and I guess just a quick segue for our listeners, we are getting inundated with questions about SMSF. If you do have more questions, please send them through hello@opencorp.com.au. What are you seeing in the SMSF landscape, and is it increasing in popularity?
Oh, categorically. I think if you look at the last numbers from the ATO, there's now something like 1.2 million Australians that have their own SMSF. About 30%, I believe, have property in it.
Right.
But that number's increased by more than 26% in the last 3 years. So the numbers seem to be pretty clear that people are seeing more value in having property as part of their super portfolio.
Yeah. We'll delve into some details, and it'd be great to get some kind of specific case studies to help everyone understand the power of it. But why do you think property is increasingly popular as part of an SMSF?
I think there's a few considerations for that. I mean, the first one is when you buy property in super and you have your super fund take out the loan, it's got no impact on your lifestyle. So you're not putting any of your money into it, you're not putting any of your income towards the loan. Anything your super fund borrows doesn't impact your personal borrowing capacity. So if you like the idea of property and having a property that doesn't impact your lifestyle and it's going to be tax-free when you stop work, I think there's a bit that you can be thinking about there.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. I know that's been the main benefit for our clients is obviously we're helping them build portolios. It's not about buying one property and stopping. It's how they can springboard from one into the next. And as well, if you think about over the last 10 years, the APRA constraints made borrowing tougher. 2017, 2018, bit of 2019. COVID happened, record low interest rates, obviously, freed things up and, clients that were able to dissociate the emotion of what was happening in COVID have made a mozza, which has been amazing for them. And then as the interest rates have increased again, through 2022, 2023, it's become harder to borrow. So everyone's kind of looking at, well, how do I continue to add to my portfolio? How do I grow it? And realizing that, with the right advice, obviously, and looking at their personal situation, it can be quite a powerful complementary stream to use their financial resources to grow their portfolio that way. So, if we kind of maybe take a step back before we delve into the property specific stuff, what are the things that people need to understand or the considerations they need to be giving to investing in SMSF and whether or not it might work for them?
Well, I think the main things is always securing quality assets, but I don't think that changes whether you're buying in a company, a trust, personal name or super. And people often say to me, isn't it more difficult to buy property in super? And I say, no, I don't think it is. If you're buying in your personal name, you want a good quality property at a good price, good location, good yields, good prospects for capital growth. Why would it be any different for your super? Whether it's your personal money or your super money, it's still your money, and you still want to get the best outcome that you can.
Yeah, I think obviously we see the industry super ads, and that they have the person going up on the lift, and because they're paying lower fees, even though the performance is not ideal, it creates a perception that they may be outperforming the market.
Yeah.
With industry funds, I guess the general belief that we hear is that it's quite straightforward. It's almost set and forget. Oh, my employer pays contributions into my industry fund.
Yep.
I don't have to worry about it. I get a statement every year. It's very easy.
Yep.
Supers for retirement, which is kind of like, way on the horizon. How hard is it to run an SMSF, to have an SMSF? Is it as difficult as the industry funds make out because they don't want to be losing the money from their fund into an SMSF? What does that landscape look like for people?
No, it's not difficult at all. And our starting proposition is, because the most common misconception people have is super is all or nothing. You're in a retail fund or you have a self-managed super fund and nothing in between. And it's not true. The opposite is the case. So our starting proposition is we always keep the client's retail fund open.
Okay.
So they've got that diversification, they've still got all of their insurances keeping intact, and it means that you can split your employer contributions across 2 different accounts. And we say to people, if you like property, great. We can bring just enough money across to your SMSF to do the property you want, have a bit of cash in the bank there to pay the bills. The rest of your super can stay where it is, continuing to grow. And if you take that approach, it's not difficult at all. And in fact, we say to everybody, when you break self-managed super down into bite-sized pieces, there's nothing about it that's difficult. Sure, it's unfamiliar to you at the moment because you haven't done it, but everybody feels that, and 6 months later it's as natural as breathing. And it's because there's 4 areas to focus on. There's the investment decisions, the tax, the audit, and the compliance. So we say to the clients, congratulations, you get the first job. Your job is to pick the property you want in super and where you want your super to work. We're here to take care of the rest of it, the tax, the audit, and the compliance. So when you've got the right people there with you and the right approach, it's not difficult at all.
Yeah, so it's very much like Cam talks about in, the OpenCorp Bible. My 4-year-old, the property investor, setting up your team is the most well, it's the second step right after you've identified your goals and before you even think about borrowing capacity and looking at property. So that sounds like it's consistent. I can imagine there'd be some people out there, Rick, who are thinking, oh, right, well, if I've got 2 super funds, that means 2 lots of fees. The trade-off is obviously simplicity. What do they need to be aware of from that perspective?
Well, even that's interesting because the average retail fund charges about 1.05% on fund balance. So if you have $100,000 in a retail account, you'll lose about $1,050 a year in fees. For a self-managed super fund, the running costs are about $2,300 a year, paid for by the super fund. But if you've got a $700,000 property in there, that's about 0.33% of the fund balance. So it can actually work out more cost effective, but it's certainly not as scary or as frightening as some people will Google or have been told. It can be quite cost effective.
Right. So based off, that's really interesting because I was going to ask you around kind of the typical balance that people need in super to be considering whether or not SMSF makes sense. So from what you were saying there, circa 230 to 250 is probably around about the mark, is it, in terms of what they would need for deposit and costs for a property and paying the $2,500 a year in the SMSF side plus 1%, give or take, of the fund balance in the retail side? Is that about right?
I can say what noting that averages aren't always helpful, but if I look at what our average client would do, they would probably put in around, if they're buying a $600,000 property, about $175,000 in deposit costs and a cash buffer. A $700,000 property is about the $225 is what the average client puts in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So assuming they had that as the minimum plus some buffer as always, and then whatever was left over in the retail fund would be invested in a diversified way.
It would continue to do what it's doing now. If they're happy with what their fund's doing, we just say leave it where it is and let the professional fund managers that you're happy with keep doing what you want to do. You focus on the property and you can leave the rest of it to them.
Well, what are the different ways that super can be, or self-managed super funds can be set up? Because we're seeing a lot of clients come through who are second generation investors. We're seeing bank of mum and dad becoming more and more popular. I think the penny's dropped for parents, and Cam talks about this a lot. For our regular listeners, that being able to gift equity to one of your kids that can get into the market today, as opposed to waiting for the inheritance in 20 years' time and where prices will be 20 years from now, is obviously really, really powerful. Yes. So these are consistent things. We're even seeing, investing partnerships where two friends that have similar goals pooling their funds to get their deposit. Can the same kind of strategies be used within super or SMSF? And if so, what are the considerations there?
Oh, absolutely it can. And when you were talking about your Bible and the 4-year-old, I very nearly said you could have the 4-year-old in the self-managed super fund, because it's quite common for us to have the children go into the super fund. We've had toddlers go in there as well.
Right.
Because really it's probably the most tax-effective way that parents can help their kids into the property market.
Right.
Because they can use the super and pull it out as a deposit for their first home. So it's one of the most tax-effective ways to help your kids.
It sounds like it'll be a complex process. Have you got a quick kind of executive summary for people on how that works?
Oh, we do more than that. We set it all up for them and make it happen. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Rick. So it sounds like there are some creative things that can be done around kids coming into super funds, and
there's a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, right. So if we maybe consider a more typical scenario, for example, there's a couple, let's say.
Yep.
Does it make sense for them both to be in, or one in and one out? What does that look like?
Oh, I think so, for a couple of reasons. If you're pooling your resources, it means you've got more super, you've got more borrowing capacity. But the greater consideration in my mind is, I say to all people, you work as a team in life. It makes sense that you work as a team in super as well.
Yeah, that makes sense, because it's highly unlikely that one partner in the couple is going to be retired 15 years before the other one, right? So that way it kind of aligns the goals and the investment strategy that is part of those compliance requirements. Create that alignment for.
Yeah, and they've made the decision together on the portfolio. They've got outside super. So to me, it just makes sense to keep working as a team, keep that synergy, and yeah. You can have up to 6 people in a self-managed super fund.
Right.
So I'm not suggesting that they go and round up another 4 people after they finish chatting to me, but they can have up to 6 people. So the partners can be in there, children can be in there. Yeah, there's a lot of flexibility, and it's all about getting the best outcome.
We started talking about property before. Let's loop back to that. So what are the kind of considerations, and I guess what works best in super from a property perspective? So you talked before around picking the right asset, excuse me, that grows in value. What do people need to be thinking about?
Well, to me, and I defer to you on property, you know far more about property than I do, but I always say to clients, it needs to be investment grade, because there is so little tax that you're going to pay on the profits. And my personal view is, if the worst case scenario is that I pay 10% tax on the profit on a property, and the best case is 0, and that's what it is in super, I want that property to be going up in value as much as possible. So I say to every client, it needs to be investment grade. I wouldn't want to be buying something that's 200 kilometres past Cooper Pedy because it's cheap, because it's probably never going to go up in value.
Yeah.
So I'd be focusing on the investment grade aspect of the property and the prospect for capital growth. I wouldn't ever compromise cash flow, but I personally would have more of a focus on the capital growth considerations.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things with, speaking personally here with, I've got property in my SMSF, as you know.
I do.
It's almost like, we talk to clients when they're buying in their personal name about a forced savings plan. So if you can put $150 away at the start, per week, for example, you can hold a property. Yep. Most people spend that on unnecessary bottles of wine and coffees and whatever else. They can find that fairly easily, but it pays a massive dividend to them over 10, 15 plus years. Yep. With super, by nature, it's a forced long-term strategy, right? You could buy a property in super and sell it before retirement. Doesn't make tax sense to do so, but you could. But it's forcing people to set and forget on that with that approach. So can you maybe just talk about how the tax environment works with super, both year to year in terms of the tax benefits with property and how they're different to buying in your personal name, and then what it looks like if you were to sell pre-retirement or post-retirement.
Okay, so probably the main consideration when it comes to tax year to year on super is how much you're losing on your employer contributions. Because for clients at the moment, their employer is paying contributions into whatever retail fund they've directed them to. As a bare minimum, 15% of that is taken straight off the top in tax, and high income earners are losing 30% tax on their contributions. So it's a tax on income. Self-managed super funds get taxed on profit. So if we bring those contributions into the self-managed fund first, and they've got property in there, as you know, they've got interest and depreciation and property management fees, and all of those expenses reduce the amount of tax that they lose. It's almost like the equivalent of negative gearing for a super fund. Yep. So clients lose a hell of a lot less tax on their employer contributions when they're going into the SMSF with property compared to the retail fund they've got now.
Got it. So hence why it can make sense. You've got more money in your SMSF pocket, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly right.
And what about when obviously the real power of buying in your super fund is while the tax environment is only 15% compared to the marginal tax rate, the real tax benefit comes
at the end.
Can you elaborate on that for people?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about, because if you sell a property in your personal name, the taxable gain goes on top of your income. So for most clients that we're dealing with, if I added, say 100,000 taxable gain on a property's their income, they're going to lose a good chunk of that at 47 cents in the dollar. In super, it's nothing like that. If they sell before they stop work, and you can, it's 10 cents in the dollar tax. If you sell after you retire, the whole lot's tax-free.
You might just want to say that again and really slow so it really sinks in. So you can buy a property in your SMSF and you're able to sell it capital gains tax-free, provided you're in the retirement phase.
Yep, once you've gone into pension phase, correct.
Amazingly powerful. So let's take, I guess, the fundamentals that I'm hearing are that you've got more control in terms of you choose what you invest in. In SMSF, you get the power of leverage because if you've got 200,000 or 300,000 in an industry fund, it's only that balance that is invested. Whereas those examples used before for a $700,000 property, it's about 225 is coming from the super fund. The rest is a loan, and you're getting growth on the 700.
Correct.
Not the 225.
Correct.
Which turbocharges the returns, obviously. So could you maybe just give us a couple of examples, no names, obviously, of clients that you've helped and what that's looked like for them?
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of them. We've done over 600 super funds now. Where it really starts to hit home, because when we're doing the tax and the audit and the compliance work, it's a requirement that we get valuations on the assets within the fund every 3 years. And I saw one there a couple of weeks ago, and it was a couple from Canberra, public servants. And I remember the conversation because they were on solid income, but nothing spectacular. And they always say, I don't know whether we should do it. This public service super fund is good. But they bought 3 properties. And we looked at the valuations, and of course valuations are more conservative, but they were up $500,000 across those 3 properties in just over 3 years.
Right.
It's a life-changing, really. That's a massive difference to their retirement position.
Yeah.
And it's gratifying to see when you talk to someone and think, oh, do I just leave it here and do nothing and earn 7 or 8%, whatever the fund was doing? But now they're $500,000 better off on valuations. It's gratifying.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The taking control, I think, is the key part. That was my motivation for setting up an SMSF, 15 years ago, a little bit longer. We're all kind of getting on. It's great to hear when people are getting out of their the comfort zone of what they know to actually explore what might be possible for them. And then getting a great result. I was, as you know, we do regular reviews with all of our clients, and I was out with one of our portfolio managers seeing a long-term client of ours. They had a self-managed super fund, that they'd been advised to set up. It wasn't really doing anything active for them. It was passive investments, and they were asking us about how it worked. We directed them in the right way to get the right kind of advice on their investment strategy and all the compliance related things. They came back to us for the property. We sat down with them yesterday, and just the 2 properties that they've got in super, our conservative forecasting was that they would be around 300,000 up after 5 years when they bought these 2 properties in their super. The reality was that they were 700,000 up. So we'd outperformed. That's not new for us. That's great to see for our clients. But really, the powerful part of it was that they put 320,000 of their super in for the deposit and costs.
It's fantastic.
So they turned 320 into 700 in 5 years. Yeah. So
when they stop work, it's all there for them tax-free.
Are there any other outcomes, scenarios, or common benefits, I guess, to investing in an SMSF that most people aren't aware of?
I would say there's quite a lot. There's a lot of flexibility, and we say to everyone, this is all about what's going to create the best outcome for you. So a common thing that we will do for clients is, not many people know that you can start to draw money out from super tax-free once you turn 60, even if you're still working, and regardless of how much you're earning. And we set this up for clients a lot, particularly for those clients who aren't on track to have their home mortgage paid off before when they'd like to stop work. And for those sorts of clients, we can say to them, what if we kept the property in super until you turn 60? We'll sell the property in super. Yes, the super fund will pay 10% tax, but then we can start to draw money out of the super fund, tax-free for you, and we can use it to wipe out the home mortgage and to wipe out your personal debt. So when the time comes for when you do want to stop work, you're as close to debt-free as humanly possible.
That's a great one. It sounds like a really effective exit strategy. As you know, I was asked by Sunrise when the interest rates were going up to talk about how people could pay their house off more quickly through property investments. I couldn't talk about super on national TV for obvious reasons, and the advice disclaimers that we put at the start of the podcast. But without doubt, people being debt free is probably the number one goal that I've heard talking to investors over 20 years. So a really powerful one. Thank you.
And I can say from first-hand experience that the feeling you get when you send that final payment to the bank and know that you're never going to pay them any more money on that mortgage, best feeling in the world. I'd like everybody to feel that.
Speaking more generally, what does the industry fund performance data tell us?
Well, there's about 1,400 retail funds in Australia.
Really?
APRA-regulated funds, absolutely. But the average for the last 10 years for retail funds in the growth category is 7.2% return per annum.
Right.
So if you had 200,000, we say to every client, if you have 200,000 in a retail fund, they can only generate a return on 200,000. So if you're getting 7.2% a year, that's made you, 14,400.
Yeah.
If you put that 200,000 into a property, what sort of capital growth over the last 10 years?
A lot more than that.
A lot more than that, there you go,
Yeah. Well, what would it be? So say 200 into something at 700,000 that generates 8% conservatively.
So a 700,000 growing at 8% is 56,000 a year.
Yeah.
So it's almost 4 times what you've got in the retail fund.
And the longer you have that's just year one, right? So
yeah, that's the compounding on the
compounding.
compounding, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's
got it.
Powerful.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned something at the start that I think is really important for everyone listening to understand, and that is, they're probably wondering, well, what's possible for me? Individual financial advice aside, from a borrowing perspective, you mentioned that they can hold these properties in their SMSF without it impacting their lifestyle, and that the borrowing capacity is not impacted. Can you just elaborate on what that looks like?
as in why it's not impacted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and this is back of the envelope stuff, because I think there's now 12 or 13 lenders in the SMSF space, so they've all got their slightly different policies. But back of the envelope, we say to clients, it's actually much simpler, the loan process for super, or the borrowing process for super. Because when you go for a loan in your personal name, the banks want to know everything about your financial
What did you have for
life.
breakfast last August?
Yeah, that's right. And how much did it cost you? Yeah. And what did you pay for the smashed avocado? All of that.
Yeah.
In super, it's really simple. They want to know how much rent are you going to get from the property and how much are your employer contributions. And then generally speaking, they want the loan repayment to be covered 1.5 times.
Mm-hmm.
So in simple terms, if your rent was going to be 27,000, your contribution for 18, the income's 45, you could have 30,000 go towards loan repayments. The other 15 is there to cover the cost of running the fund, so your tax return and your audit, costs for the property like repairs and maintenance, and then a cash buffer, so your super fund's not under financial duress.
Yeah, perfect. So just to make it really, really simple, I guess, self-managed super sits in its own standalone entity, separate to whatever investors might be doing in their personal name, right? So you might have one property, 3, 5, 10 properties in your personal name or trusts or whatever it might be.
Yes.
Working the way that it works. And then if you have the borrowing capacity in a self-managed super fund based on the rent from the expected property and the employer contributions, then you might be maxed out and unable to qualify for another loan personally.
Yes.
But that's how you can invest in super, because they're effectively standalone entities.
Completely separate.
Yeah.
In terms of criteria, in terms of legal structure, everything, you are completely separate to your SMSF.
Yeah. Great. So if people are sitting there listening today, Rick, thinking, I'd be interested to know more and see if it would work for me, what are the first steps? Like, what do they actually have to do? Where do they start?
It's pretty straightforward. I mean, we start with a chat and have a bit of a conversation and do a free session on SMSF. And we say to the clients, it's all about them. It's all about what they'd like to get out of the session, what information they'd like to find out, what questions they want answers to. And then we follow that up with some information by email and video, and then give them time to digest it, come back and talk to OpenCorp about what sort of property options there are. And when it all looks like it's coming together, it looks like the right thing for them to do, they can get started, and we say welcome aboard.
Right, great. So it's not overly time consuming. How long would this chat be? 30 to 45 minutes type thing?
Yep. Correct, 30 minutes.
Yeah. So let's say by the time you get some supporting documents and you look at a property, all in 2.5 to 3 hours, you could be getting started. I think that's really important for people to understand based on where the market's at right now. There are different markets across Australia, obviously, but the turbocharge we're in September now, the turbocharge that's about to happen in the market October 1st, with the government bringing forward
First home buyer, absolutely.
So for those listening that aren't aware, I'll try and keep this simple. Basically, from the election last year, the government had a mandate to try to improve the ability for first home buyers to get into the market. The policy that they created was one where a first home buyer could buy a house with a 5% deposit. The Australian government would guarantee the other 15%, meaning they could buy a property and avoid lenders' mortgage insurance. There used to be income caps, there used to be price caps, at different points in different capital cities. As of, 3 weeks ago-ish or thereabouts, an announcement was made that the policy is no longer taking effect from the 1st of January next year. It's being brought forward to the 1st of October 2025. The qualification purchase prices have increased across the board, in some capital cities substantially, and the income thresholds have been removed. So in a drastic example, you could earn $1 million a year, buy a house with a 5% deposit. So in terms of understanding what this means for investors and property prices, firstly, I look at the logical part of it and say, well, the government's not going to be guaranteeing 15% of anything unless it's going to go up in value. So that's a pretty good indicator for us. Secondly, this policy, yes, it's improving accessibility to first home buyers to get into the market. The window of that accessibility, though, is going to be so small because it'll be the people that can act straight away. It's going to turbocharge demand. without doing anything to address the fundamental undersupply in the market. So,
Agreed.
While we always look at property as a long-term proposition, the short-term prospects, especially the most affordable capital cities, are really, really strong. So, encourage anyone out there, whether it's personal or SMSF, if investing is on your radar and you've maybe been sitting on the fence, hopefully what we've spoken about today, provides some good impetus to explore your situation further and take some action to benefit from that. Is there anything that you'd add to? That?
Just on the last bit that you said there, one of the supporting things that we do, because we understand how hot the market is in some areas, and as you can appreciate, the key to getting good quality or good property is to be able to control it. So when one of your clients decides they would like to do an SMSF, speed is the key. So we will get the purchasing entities back to OpenCorp within 36 hours of getting the client information. So you can be controlling the properties and getting them off the market for the clients when they see something that they want to go for.
Absolutely. Awesome. Guys, there is today's Brick for the Future podcast episode. Rick, thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
I think the takeaway points are, that something might be new. It might be a little bit foreign. Doesn't mean it needs to be scary. Work with the right people, set up your team. While again we can't provide specific advice, talk to the people that can provide that advice. The benefit to me personally for SMSF has been control, leverage, superior returns, the tax environment when you hit retirement, and being able to keep all the profit effectively in your pocket. So thank you for joining us. I hope you found that valuable, and we will see you next time on Brick to the Future.